acknowledge their connection to land, sea, spirit and community, and extends that to any Aboriginal people joining us today. Well, hello, my name's Sam Quirke. I'm also joined by Simon Trenker. We're your co-hosts today and the co-organisers of Customer Success Australia Meetup. We're really pleased that you've gotten yourselves involved in this community of customer success practitioners and that you're here with us tonight for our first event. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So we're on Zoom tonight. Please stay muted throughout the meeting, or sorry, the event. You can ask any questions that you'd like to our awesome panel tonight through Slido. Just head to slido.com and put in the code 460652. Simon's popped that link in the chat there. Answer any questions, upvote ones that you want to hear from, and at the end of the panel discussion tonight, we will be directing those to our panelists and get those questions answered for you. And a bit of an agenda. So we're going through the welcome now. We'll jump into the panel discussion covering the state of the state of CS in Australia. Then we'll move into a Q&A and then networking in some Zoom breakout rooms. We've seen that a lot of people are looking to get some networking opportunity out of this meetup, connect with customer success professionals from around Australia, and we want to make sure that we are facilitating that for you, even though we are meeting online. So a bit about this meetup to start and set the scene. So our mission is to foster an environment of collaborative growth for customer success professionals here in Australia. We're trying to build a flourishing CS community where members have the opportunities to learn, network and grow. We're looking to do these events every 2 months, approximately online and in person. So any events that we are having in person, we will have them online as well, so you can join us from wherever you are around Australia. And the format, today we're doing a panel discussion. We'll be doing more talks and networking events, but we really want to hear from you. What do you want to get out of this community that they're here for? We're only going to be as strong as the people that it serves, so we really want to hear your voice. Get involved and tell us what you want to get out of this community. We'll be sending a follow-up survey after this event to sort of find out what you want to get out of it. And our next meetup will be hosted by the great folks at Yellowfin BI. That's going to be on Wednesday, the 4th of August at 6 p.m. And it's going to be in person, hosted by Yellowfin at their head office in the Melbourne CBD. Again, that will be accessible online if you're not in Melbourne or if you can't make it in person. And fingers crossed in Melbourne, we will be able to be having it. We're still working through what the theme's going to be, but please tell us, what do you want to hear? What's keeping you up at night as a CS practitioner? What's interesting to you? What do you want to find out about? And a great way to let us know is through Slido. There's a section over there for ideas for the upcoming event. And again, we'll also be asking that in a follow-up survey. Now I'll hand over to Simon to introduce your panelists for the night.
Thank you very much, Sam. And as mentioned, my name is Simon. Very happy to see everyone here tonight. Thank you very much for joining. We have some fantastic guests tonight, so I'd just like to jump in and introduce our guests. So our first guest is Mark Woodrow. And Mark is a Microsoft 365 evangelist and customer success leader at Engaged Squared. So with extensive experience in digital technology, Mark is a customer success lead and a senior communications strategist who is well regarded as a strategic thinker, advisor, facilitator, and manager. Having been in a customer success leader throughout the transition from account management to customer success, Mark possesses a plethora of knowledge and understands the value that the CS trade offers to a variety of industries. So Mark has a strong interest in innovation, customer experience, design thinking, and social collaboration for business. So welcome, Mark. Secondly, we have Abi. So Abi Goodfellow. Abi is the APAC manager of customer success at Deputy. And a bit of a background on Abi. She started in SaaS sales at then a little known startup called Yammer. So after her time with Microsoft, she's continued to pursue the goal of helping people to do their best work. So doing so in a range of roles, from customer success to community manager, from organizational change management to consulting. And she's built, grown and been a part of communities everywhere from Amsterdam, London to Sydney and Melbourne in order to learn, teach, bring together and meet others passionate about the same things. So she's an adoption specialist and a self-professed technology geek. She enjoys coaching customers and colleagues alike to define what they want to be successful at and then helping them to achieve it. So again, welcome, Abi. Very happy to have you here. And finally, we have Tas. Tas is a manager of customer success at MYOB. She has a passion for designing business solutions that enhance the customer experience. And this has naturally led her to the customer success space. So she leads a number of highly engaged, high-performing teams globally that are dedicated to ensuring the business achieves its key objective. So ultimately producing happy and successful customers. And her aim is to always be a strong customer advocate and ensure the voice of the customer is understood and reflected across all parts of the business. So welcome, Tas. And so with all of that said, I might pass it over to Sam to kick us off with the first question.
Thanks very much, Simon. Right, so we'll jump in. So, team, everyone can understand your perspective of customer success. Could you start with telling us a bit about your company, the products that you work with, and the customers you're working with? Are they high touch? Are they low touch? What sort of industries are you working with? So we can start to get a bit of an understanding about your perspective of customer success and what it means to your organisation. Mark, we'll start with you.
Sure, and thanks for organising this and welcome everyone. I've had a customer success career for, I don't know, eight or so years, and I've been involved in mainly in high touch and mainly dealing with enterprise customers. So I started off with Yammer and Microsoft about 7 or 8 years ago. With Abi was one of my colleagues on a global team, and that was very much, we defined that by being high touch globally. We had 50, I think, customer success managers. I've worked at a startup. I worked in media monitoring and running customer success teams at different levels. And now I'm an evangelist, but it's a customer success title by a different name. That's why I have a customer success expert t-shirt on for everyone. And so primarily I still do the high touch, but I do things, I feel like things like blogs, webinars, contact with customers that way is the way that they'll probably do the low touch work. And industry-wise, I've worked with lots of different industries, but I think there is something, each place that you work in customer success has its own culture by definition. So it's different. You might be doing high touch enterprise, but it's going to be different from one organization to the next. And I'm sure we'll get onto that as we talk through ideas of approaching customer success.
Thanks, Mark. Abi, over to you. Can you tell us a bit about your background at Deputy and the customers you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. So Mark stole my thunder in terms of my bit of my background. So Yammer and then Microsoft, and then actually a bit of time at the company he's currently with. So it's you can't get away from Mark, basically, if you try. Now I work for a company called Deputy. So we are a SaaS company headquartered in Sydney that do workforce management with a mission to simplify shift work. Headquartered in Sydney, but we have offices in London and the US as well. So we have a global reach, which is very exciting. My bread and butter background has been high touch, as Mark mentioned, but my current role is I manage the team in APAC that does both SMB and mid-market up to strategic customer success. So for me, it's really been geeking out recently about how to make sure that we can deliver a great customer experience and help customers reach their goal at scale to cover that more SMB side of the business, especially During COVID, when a lot of our main industry customers, because we particularly look at retail, hospitality, as well as healthcare, as well as covering a range of other industries, but they're kind of our main ones that we work with. They were heavily hit during COVID. So that was a real big practice for me in scaling customer success for customers who are really impacted, and how do you project empathy at scale and support them in a way that makes sense.
Fantastic. Thanks, Abi. And over to you, Tas.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks for having me, and really nice to see so many people on the call. My background, I've been in customer success for about 5-6 years, but most recently, it was about 8 months ago now, I joined MYOB, and it was to join to really develop the function. So previously they didn't have a customer success function. So when we talk about kind of the state of customer success in Australia, I think that's an interesting point, right? This is one of the largest tech companies in Australia, and customer success is relatively new to the company. Not saying that we didn't have a great focus on customers, or that great customer success initiatives weren't happening, but of course it wasn't centralized and wasn't coordinated in one place. So yeah, it started 8 months ago. Obviously, MYOB, accounting, and more broadly, kind of business management platform in Australia and New Zealand. And I'm setting up the customer success function for the accounting and professional services space. So working with close to 8,000 customers, and ranging really from small sole accountants to bookkeepers to large accounting firms like EY. So really having to think through what our segmentation looks like, how we deliver high touch customer success for those larger, more complex customers, as well as more tech touch and low touch customer success for the smaller cohort.
Fantastic. It definitely seems like we have quite a diverse group of customer sets, given that everyone's experiencing and working with SMBs to enterprise, and trying to figure out how we're going to how to scale that experience with different customers from low touch to high touch. So it's really an interesting dynamic there, and I suppose leads us directly into our next question, being we'd love to learn more about your exposure, each of your exposure to the way that the industry has evolved over the past few years, and how that scaling, how all of that differs to what customer success is today. And so I suppose the question being, what has been your journey into customer success, and how have you observed the evolution of the trade since becoming involved? So maybe we could kick that off with Tas.
Yeah, sure. Look, so in terms of my journey, I fell into customer success. I think a lot of people might say that, they kind of fell into it. And often it is because of just personalities as well. I find that there's a certain personality, certain interest that really falls into that space. I think people who really like to think of the kind of the bigger picture, like to, join the dots, pull the threads all together, and people who are really inclined to really want to help and find solutions for customers. So my background is in process management, continuous improvement, service design, and I was rolling out a kind of continuous improvement program at an organization, and started using some software to help me with that, and then fell in love with the software. Still the best process management software out there. If anyone's interested, I'll let you know who they are. But yeah, so started using it, loved it, and then got to know the company. And it was at that stage, it was a small New Zealand company. And they asked me to come on board and help with the implementation of the software and the onboarding of customers. And it was a really amazing experience for me in terms of seeing customer success and seeing how successful customer success can be as a culture, because customer success was at the core of everything that organization did, because it came from the top. So it was something that the founders really believed in, and you could see how it flowed through to the sales team, to the support team, to the product team, to customer success, you could see it in terms of the handshakes between us. So we even had sales, you know, as they passed on the sales through to the onboarding team, you know, they documented what the goals of the customer was. We didn't get as far as getting them to document the success measures. We were aiming for that, but we didn't get that far. But still, you could really see that they were thinking through what success was going to look like for the customer, and then that flowed through all the way to the customer success team. But it was an incredibly high touch model in terms of the actual customer success team. We could get away with that. We had a smaller group of customers, but it was incredibly successful in terms of the number of our customers that were advocates. Then we were actually purchased by a US company, a bigger US company. And it was interesting because they had just set up a customer success function. So I think often you compare US and Australia and you think US is much more mature. But in this example anyway, they had just set up a function. We're really looking to us to try to think through how to build it out. But we did go from having, you know, 500, 600, 700 customers to thousands overnight. So then we had to think through, okay, well, how do we scale what we do? We know we do it well, but how do we actually get this out to a broader customer base? So that's where I started thinking through kind of segmentation models and health measures, and we implemented Gainsight at that stage as well, and really tried to accelerate the way that we did customer success. And I think because of the maturity of the US market, and we were dealing with mostly execs in the US, we probably were able to accelerate that a lot more than we possibly could have if we didn't have that maturity. So we were able to very quickly get our segmentation models and operationalize our playbooks and get our the analytics together to do our health scores and so on. So that was a really interesting experience. And then I jumped over to MYOB because I saw this other opportunity of, again, building a customer success function from scratch. And that's been very interesting, comparing it again from the US market to the AU market. So I'll pause there. I've got lots more to say, but I'll pause there because I'm obviously very keen to hear from Abi and Mark as well.
Yeah, I can pick up on my journey a little bit. So it's a bit of a funny anecdote, but I also fell into customer success. I was lead generation, so in the sales side of the business at Yammer. Very early days, I was in the satellite office in London when the headquarters was in San Francisco, and I remember there wasn't enough phones for the salespeople, so you kind of had to share and make sure you weren't calling people at the same time in the days of physical phones. And I remember one time there wasn't enough chairs, so one of the girls had to sit on the stairs. So it was pretty startup life back in the day. And I knew I should move across to customer success when a prospect at the time messaged me and said, "You're the nicest person I've never bought from." And I was like, I think I probably am more of the helping people, getting them to adopt side of things. So I've been in customer success mostly ever since. As Simon mentioned, I did do a brief stint at Commonwealth Bank as Yammer community manager, so helping roll out Yammer from within the company, which was really interesting, to 40,000 people. So really interesting to be that side, and also be the person who gets helped by customer success managers from Microsoft in that role. There were two amazing customer success managers that helped me roll that out, as well as Office 365 as part of a wider team. And they had such different approaches. That was a huge learning experience for me in terms of how to adjust as a customer success manager, how to receive it, and the different options in terms of the personality types and the ways you can go about it from a customer success perspective, and what works and what doesn't. So that was a really interesting experiment for me. In terms of how I've observed the evolution of the trade, that's a really interesting question, because I started in London, so it was more kind of the EMEA side of things, but Yammer was really great at thinking about customer success early. So it was 2012, quite forward thinking, in that they already had ratios of how many customers to CSMs they wanted and how they were going to build that as they scaled, which, looking back, is so revolutionary. We had a really strong playbook, a really strong idea about the global presence. So Mark was in Australia and I was in London, and yet I spoke to him. He'd probably say too much, but but I'd say at least once a week, and we really shared ideas. Customer stories was such a thing. So that really showed me how it could be really early on. And then it was interesting going into Microsoft, where customer success was quite a new concept, but account management was very strong. So the learning there was about how to be a customer success manager with a really strong account management function there, as well as a really strong account management team. So I think we on the call will mostly know that they're quite different and distinct. But since then, I think I've dealt with a lot of companies, both within them and just talking to different people where they can be quite muddled. And so in terms of the evolution of the trade, I'd say there's becoming a stronger differentiator between those roles, what CSM does, how to measure it, how to have some amazing tools have developed into the market of how we can better manage our portfolios and things like that. So that's all growing stronger, but it's still quite patchy and varied depending on which company you go to. And I think regional as well, there's still some quite variations there.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I think there's been there's been quite a evolution in Australia. I know I was involved in a LinkedIn report 2.5, 3 years ago when customer success was one of the 5 fastest growing roles in Australia. So and it still is a growing role. So when I started, there was less than 100 customer success managers. It looked like in Australia. And that sort of ramped up to a few hundred, and then they were sort of LinkedIn was sort of tracking sort of 1,000 and then 2,000 roles being advertised. So it has been high growth, and there's been in different places they're at different stages. To me, you need to go back a little bit to the history. If you actually go back to what look at customer success, it did start in America around the term with Salesforce. It was around retention. I do a lot of work in adoption, so it's not about sales. It's about growth that actually comes from the customers themselves. A good account manager will actually drive in a particular customer growth by delivering successful projects. But I think in customer success, one of the magic ingredients is in the name itself, the actual stories that you tell of what customers are doing really well to others, and they become your advocates, and they will tell other people within the organization why what you're offering is such a good thing. So I call it a beachhead strategy, but it's sort of that land and expand organically, as opposed to just driving it through account management and sales. So I think working hand in hand with those people, and then across industries and across geographies. There's definitely, when I've worked in global teams, banks in Australia like to talk to banks in Singapore about how they're doing things well. So you can actually, and within industries, it can work well. So I still think there's something, you can have all the health metric tracking that you want, but a really, really good story and a really, really good advocate is going to get you a hell of a long way.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah, that's a fantastic point there on the importance of stories in customer success. And Abi and Tas, I think I saw everyone nodding when you both said you fell into customer success. So that seems to be quite a common occurrence amongst everyone here. Maybe if we could continue with a point you're raising before, Mark, in terms of customer success, starting in the US and then where we're at here. And I guess it sort of leads us to the theme of tonight. So the state of customer success in Australia. So could you talk a bit more to the CS landscape in Australia? Do you feel it's different to the US or elsewhere? Abi, I know you've worked in CS overseas as well. Do we have the opportunity to shape our own culture, our own CS culture here in Australia? Mark, if I could start with you.
Definitely, I think look, a lot of people will relate to this, but Australia is very good. We're very good at adopting things quickly and new concepts, and in technology. We like that. And we're also rebels. There's something in there. There's something about. So I know that the American teams thought we were a little bit rebellious and do things a bit differently. But I actually think that's what Australians do. They do things in an agile way. And they'll experiment, and they like to. I think there is something about an Australian culture Whereas if you do customer success, I was lucky enough to go to, say, Sri Lanka and deal with some of the industry conglomerates in there, and it's obviously a completely different environment, and how you'd run customer success in Asia Pac will be slightly different. So I think you've got to be sensitive to the cultural things, and obviously there's a difference sometimes. You know, people I think I'll do a broad assumption and get myself into trouble here, but Americans tend to like to tell people how to do things. Australians quite like to actually show people and get involved with people and do things, you know, with them. And other areas of the world, they actually like to be shown the process and shown what comes before and an order of things. Now that's an example where I know that broadly you need to take nuances of that wherever country, and then you take what the culture of your organization and teams and what have you, and like all things, diversity is what really works. So you've got you know, Abi and I are not the same age, and we're from different places and different sexes, but like you'll find that will actually mean that you'll look at a problem in a different way and come up with a different solution. So I encourage any group to not think there's a one type of customer success manager. I think you've got diversity. You'll lead to sort of lead to success just by its very nature of being a good fit.
I feel like Australia is also, as a market, it's quite close knit. That's one of the things I'd noticed when I came from London, that people know each other here. So customer success is so vital because it's such a small, close knit community, and word of mouth is so strong here. So it is really worth building those relationships and investing in CS everywhere. But that is the one thing I've noticed in this region, particularly how important it is.
Yeah, relationships are so important. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to position myself at all as an expert in this, and I can only really speak, you know, from my experience, having worked in both the US company and now an Australian, a large Australian company. There are some elements that I've definitely seen in the Australian market around customer success being a bit of a pseudo account manager role in a lot of the roles that I've seen advertised. And so I think definitely really expanding the understanding of customer success and account managers being very separate, working really closely together, providing a lot of value, but different value. I definitely see that as something that we probably still need to progress on. I think also I hear a lot about the monetization of customer success, and I hear that a lot, mostly from kind of the US market. And I think that could possibly be because, you know, as you become more mature in the way that you deliver customer success and the value you provide, then you can start thinking through the monetization of that. I personally haven't seen a model that has worked very well in that space, but I'd be super interested to hear if others have. But those are the two things that really come to mind when I think about kind of the state of customer success and where we're at compared to other regions.
I might just jump on that point there you made, Tas, on sort of monetization of CS, because there has been a question popped in. I'm not jumping too far ahead to the Q&A, but just thought it was topical that, you know, do you think CSM, someone's asked, do you think CSM should talk money and renewals with their clients? So are you saying there that you feel that that as a function is more focused on in the US compared to here, or is that rather the way that customer success managers are treating you know, upsell opportunities and expansion within the current the clients that they work with?
Yeah, so I suppose the way I see that question is more around that expansion charter. So if you think through the kind of the core charters of customer success, you know, adoption, retention, expansion, then it's probably just, you know, saying, hey, you know, what role do we have in that expansion space. And I personally believe we have a very important role. What that looks like, again, probably depends on maturity of not even that, but the context of where you're working. But I think absolutely from a renewals perspective, but we are so well placed to be kind of the growth engine of the organisation. So be it identifying services revenue, if you do happen to have paid services, then obviously customer success is the perfect place to do that. But in terms of additional rev around software, I think you could either be a lead generator, and that's fine, but there's also room for actually dealing with kind of more simple upsell and expansion opportunities for sure. Not saying that you would then take away the responsibility of account managers, but it's about seeing what would be best placed in customer success versus the sales function. And I think those kind of simple, like might be additional seats or something like that, makes a lot of sense to sit in customer success, whereas the larger things like additional modules might then be pushed out to the sales function to work on. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to give a really hedged answer to this one because I'm still trying to work out what makes most sense. And also I'm that strange breed of person who actually really likes talking about renewals and that kind of thing. I think it's my little year in sales I did coming to haunt me every now and again. But in terms of, I'm quite a purist as well, right? I think customer success, as soon as we start talking about numbers and money and haggling with customers, then we lose an element of trusted advisor. And so it's really about treading that line as to, yes, if it's a really straightforward renewal and it's not a new sales cycle and you're not going to have to, take a lot of the time that you should otherwise be spending on adoption of customers and managing your portfolio and making sure they're really successful and loving your and getting great value for themselves. Yes, that can work. But it's also about trying to make sure you don't create a gray area with sales. So if we are dealing with money and renewals and things like that, where do we stop and where do they start? I think personally, I find it clearer just to have CS deal with adoption, drive expansion, and then hit it over to account management or sales to do that more commercial side. But I understand that in a lot of organizations, that's just not practical, just due to numbers and the like.
Yeah, good point. I think just quickly, the trick is the timing of some of the engagement. So a good customer success person wouldn't necessarily just be turning up at renewal time. That you can have teams, and they'll also be turning up when it's actually what's important to the customer. So it'll be around their cycle, not your cycle. So you can tell this renewal process, the place to do good work around renewals is often 3-6 months before at things that are actually important to the customer. Because by definition, your renewals with happy customers, successful customers, they'll grow and be happy. So I guess that's one of the tricks you can use. And I noticed in Slido some of the dissatisfied customers. Got to be careful, obviously, not to have too much there, but there was a way I often found that we talked about having red dots and green dots and amber dots as whether, and Abby's giggling all over the place, but if someone is a red dot, they're really sort of anti your service, or they think they've got something and they're not even dissatisfied. They don't really know, and they're just a bit objectionable. And sometimes working with those customers who actually, you can actually turn them around, and if you can get them to be, lukewarm and amber, and then they often become your advocates. So I wouldn't say concentrate on all your dissatisfied customers, but bear in mind that there's nothing makes a greater advocate than someone that thought something wasn't working, and a customer success manager helped turn them around. They will become, so I think there is some value in doing work with sometimes with dissatisfied customers if you can stomach it.
Yeah, I think interesting. I'm just looking at the questions as well on Slido, and you often do hear, this idea of the trusted advisor and wanting to maintain that, and how important it is in customer success, and how that could potentially be at odds with the expansion or the sales role. But I think actually, and Mark, you touched on this as well, you know, if your customers are successful, they will grow. And so it's about the conversation you have. And so as a trusted advisor, you talk through what is in the best interest of the customer, and that growth opportunity is likely in the best interest. And as part of those conversations, you're making sure that it aligns with where they want to go, and that you have very clear success metrics to show the benefit of that growth. So I think you can still very much hold on to that idea of a trusted advisor and still be expanding the account.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a common theme here around not maybe treading, as Abi mentioned, that just being careful not to overstep the line. Obviously, we want to maintain that sort of figure of being a trusted advisor and being someone that they can go to and genuinely ask a question or have a concern, and know that they're not going to, you know, feel taken advantage of, for example. So I think that also ties into the previous question in regards to having that cultural intelligence, having that emotional intelligence of where you're working in different countries, and understanding where that line actually is. So I think that's a big, it seems to be an important aspect to take into consideration as well. And actually leads into our next question, which is in relation to the state of the world at the moment. And obviously we've all had to adjust to a new way of working, and, you know, in-person customer interactions are less common now, and we're working in the office less. So on the one hand, we might be finding it easier to engage with customers through online mediums, but you know, we'd love everyone today to leave with one tip or trick to basically provide some advice or a trick you can provide to CS professionals for forming strong connections with customers in the COVID era. And maybe we could open it up to the floor.
I was going to say, Abi, you were mentioning, you know, this idea of empathy and how important that was. And yeah, I thought that makes a lot of sense to me. I'd love to hear more about that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I should say on this, but I'll be quite transparent with you all. So because a lot of our customers were heavily impacted industries, I know Australia, we were quite lucky, but a lot of our customers were heavily impacted during that time of lockdowns. And so we actually diverted a lot of our normal resources, so recruitment, because we'd paused recruitment during that time, sales, because not much was happening there, but also just because we thought it was the right thing to do. We pivoted as well, of course, as customer success, and we set up a bit of a team to call our customers, as many as we could, starting with our strategic ones, but just getting to as many as we could who we thought would be impacted, and mostly just asking if they were okay. And this sounds really naive, but it was great. We got to talk to lots of customers who had really, you know, heart-wrenching stories of owning this business, or if they're on the bigger end of the scale, of how much that was impacting them and some of the plans they had to do. And just us calling them and saying, "Are you okay? Is there anything we can do to help?" was so good for the long-term relationship. And yes, we had to make some discounts, and we implemented a capability in our product where customers could pause the account, which wasn't there before. So instead of having to churn, they could just pause, it locked down their account, but they could still access the information they needed to, for example, because it's workforce management, to be able to do their job keeper data and proof of who had worked and all that kind of stuff. So again, that was about taking our product team and saying, stop what you're working on. What do our customers actually need now, and how can we best serve them? So I think that worked really well, and we've created some amazing advocates off of that, but also we just as a company did the right thing, I think. And so look, it's not a long-term thing. It was very COVID specific, but in terms of we've created a great base that now if customers know they're in trouble, they know we're here to help, and they know we're the company who helped them do the right thing, really.
I love that idea. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I'm very lucky to be working with Microsoft 365 and Teams in particular, because that's just boomed in the last over this COVID period. That's and Microsoft itself, work remotely and use these tools, and in Engaged Squared, I help companies deal with sort of how to do the virtual stuff and how to work in a blended way. I think a couple of quick tips is if you're using your virtual tools, there's something called you should look it up, but work out loud is really important, so people actually do their work visibly and people can see it. I think that really helps in this when you're sort of working virtually, to the point where you can actually be working together on things. So there's no point in having private chats and private channels and what have you. Be open about what you're doing. And what things like this you're joining, to let people know that becomes that's something to look at. You look up a guy called John Stepper. He's really good on working out loud. And the other thing to watch is I know that a lot of management is trying to work out how to have this blended workforce, but I think the reality is the workforce, a lot of us want to work from wherever. I say so I guess enabling them to do that, and certainly not trying to track them to come and work 3 days a week at the office and all that. It's getting pushed back. So I think companies have to be and we advise them as customer success people is to sort of try and enable people to work with from anywhere in a blended way. There's great advantages obviously in doing things face to face. Of course, I had one coffee meeting this year, and the coffee meetings are great for customer success people. I highly recommend them. They're the best check-in you can do. And James Dello actually joined us on the basis of that coffee. So it's also good for your own careers, and it's also good for your recruitment if you're recruiting people.
So that's a poaching tip, is it, Mark?
Yeah, good coffee. Good coffee.
Yeah.
He is the customer success expert. So.
Yeah. I think carrying on the same thread, actually, one thing that I think has probably been discussed a fair bit as people have been working remotely and using tools like Teams and Zoom and so on to communicate to customers, it has allowed us to humanize ourselves, our companies, our customers a lot more as well. And I think that's been really interesting. So I know I've got a little, background on at the moment, but, often, when I say to my team in the conversations we have with customers, like, take off the background. And so, your customers can see that, you've got a bit of a messy, room in the background, and the doorbell rings for the third delivery of the hour because you've been doing so much online shopping, or your kid runs in wanting to open a jar or whatever it is. That type of thing really actually helps you connect. And back to that point you made, Abi, about relationships and how important it is in the Australian market. Well, that's just like the perfect way to strengthen those relationships, because you have, and we're all in a similar position, right? We're all trying to juggle this crazy world that we're in. So I would say that's probably a big tip, and that I've given my team anyway in those calls.
I'd agree with that as well, in terms of also just setting aside time at the beginning of calls to have that human chat with your customers and also internally. We'd have that if we were in person. You'd have that moment where you walked through the door. So it's about consciously creating those so that you are making those connections. The one thing I have actually struggled with during COVID, I think during remote customer success more than I did in person, was how do you, and this is more one back to you all, I guess, but how do you form the relationships with other stakeholders? Or how do you, if you go to a big customer's office and then they introduce you to other people, you're starting to get those already. Whereas I find it a lot harder, especially if a lot of people join a conference call, it's much harder to build those relationships. There's not those moments when you're walking between rooms where you can kind of have that side conversation. So if anyone has any tips for those, please send them across. Or Mark or Taz, do you have any?
It's a really good point, Abi. I totally agree. And I don't know if I've got any good tips, but it's definitely one that's worth brainstorming with the team and speaking. Yeah, I'll definitely take that one back and speak to the team and talk to them about if they've got any good ideas of what we could do. And it could be particular kind of small scale events where we invite more than just our direct contacts to that event. I'm not sure. It's a really good one.
Yeah, it's really hard. The only tip I have is that actually just try and do very brief, ask people for a bit of their time, 15 minutes of their time, if they can check on one-to-one. I think it's the best. Like, I'm learning heaps from Tas now, and it means that, like, I could actually say, could I just have a 15-minute conversation with you about X? Just make it a single topic, or make it really non-threatening. You might find that 15 minutes or 20 minutes will actually will grow into something. I think that's about the only way, because you can't really do it in bigger meetings. But you can suddenly say, can I come and talk to you just about understanding the structure of your business or what have you. I think that's probably the best way. And what's really nice, as you've described, relationships and the kids and the cats and other things, and the gin and tonics that are all that all appear on your screen. That actually, I think people find that that easier. And my tip is, if you can try and schedule a bit of time in for like 5 o'clock or something, people to start to use that as an excuse to sort of unwind.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Abi and Tas. Yeah, those are some really great tips. And I'd say for me, the key takeaway there is, trying to put aside time and proactively go out of the way to have these interactions with our customers that we're not getting to have organically anymore. And I'd say a good way to roll into the Q&A. Again, everyone, feel free to ask your questions in Slido. We posted the link there, and we probably got time to get through a few here. So the top one, the one that's been upvoted the most at the moment, is from Mary. Thank you, Mary, for asking that. What methods have worked best in turning a disengaged customer around? And I'd say that, that's in particular rolling off from now we're working in, the online environment, taking that into account. What are some good strategies that you've used, especially in terms of where we are at the moment in turning disengaged customers around? I'll throw that to the panel, whoever wants to take that one.
That's a good question. It's not an easy question. And of course, it depends on the context, it depends on, all sorts of things. We kind of, our catchphrase, and there's a few people, actually, there's a couple of people here that are part of the team who joined. So this will be close to their heart, but we say, listen, understand, and guide. So for me, it would be that first stage of listening. So really listening and really understanding what the issue is before you launch into any suggestions on how to improve the situation. So I know it's super simple, but it's incredibly powerful, and often, particularly if you are a subject matter expert, or you have a lot of experience, you can very quickly just jump to the solution without really understanding what the core issue is for that particular person or company. So, yeah.
Flipping it on its head from an experience perspective. So I mentioned I have been on the other side of customer success. And so thinking about this question from that perspective, I think it's always worth bearing in mind that if a customer is disengaged, there could be many reasons. And to Tas's point, it's about uncovering what they are, because sometimes that's not about your tool, it's not about your service, it's actually about their company context. And so sometimes you have to get a bit creative of being, so what's going on? Is there politics within the team? Is there some new champion, some new owner that's come in and has a different perspective on things? Do I have to turn them around? So it's really about diving deep in those scenarios if it's a very high touch customer and it makes sense, and getting a bit creative about how you can help your champions to turn it around in a way that makes sense for that context. And then if I flip it to an SMB or a lower touch customer success perspective, the easiest way to turn around a disengaged customer is to stop them getting there in the first place. So from that perspective, data is your friend. So the project we've been working on is, what's the main aha moment, and how can we remove the friction for them to get there? Because once they reach that aha moment, it's a lot easier to keep them happy, healthy, and renewing and expanding and advocating for you than it is if you drop them off somewhere before. So yeah, from that perspective, it's about understanding, really mapping the customer journey and understanding where that main friction can be, and then creating temporary and long-term solutions as an organization to try and help that customer has an amazing experience so they never get to that point, that disengaged point, not the aha point. That's the point.
The other two are too good on this topic, but just quickly, I think value add is what we're in the business of. So find a way to add some value. Often the disengaged people it's finding that they're not necessarily your immediate contacts. And that sometimes it's simple, like, can we bring another customer that has the same problem, or can we run a workshop for you? It's actually really easy for the people that I know are in customer success to do those things. That's not necessarily hard for us, but from a customer point of view, they don't, get them in a room and facilitate a workshop. They don't get the opportunity to do that very often, or bring another customer in to talk to them about how to deal with a problem. They certainly don't get that opportunity. And I guess that's a couple of the things in your toolkit that you can occasionally bring up.
Yeah, I just to add to that as well, obviously listening, understanding, and once you do understand what the issue is, I think the other important aspect, and you spoke about this toolkit, I'm a big advocate and supporter of have your case studies, have your kind of your use cases there to pull out. So you need to be able to, as you identify what the issues are, then give really real life practical examples of things that, again, show the value you can produce that aligns with the need of the customer. So for me and the team, when I speak to the team about what they should have in their toolkit and what they should focus on, it's have a lot of stories. Mark, back to your point about stories, have a lot of stories there that you can tell, because that's going to make the most impact.
Fantastic. Thanks all. And hope that answers your question, Mary. I don't think it turned out to be too hard in the end. That's fantastic. Well, I think at this point I'll hand over to Simon to wrap up, and then send us all into some break rooms for a networking opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sam, and thank you to all of our guests and for all of the questions. I think it's exceeded our expectations. It's been fantastic so far. So really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your engagement. Just before we close up, for the next portion, we'd love to send you out into a few breakout rooms and allow yourselves to engage with each other, ask each other a few questions. And what we'll do is we'll keep the chat open for about 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes, we'll give you a 1-minute warning and then end the call at the end. But before we do that, I just want to say, please get your network involved. Feel free to share with your friends or other people in the industry to come along and make some suggestions and give us some feedback for our next topic. And feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we are currently going to be updating all of our future events and things that are happening in this space. And we'll follow up with a bit of a survey. So again, we'd love to have your feedback to understand exactly what you want to see in the next session. We'll take that feedback on board and then be able to coordinate an event that touches on those topics. So thank you very much for being involved. And as a topic, before we get into the breakout rooms, we'd encourage you to discuss the topics that we've discussed today. So where you think the industry is heading, and therefore, what topics you'd like to then be covered in our next event. So as I put you into breakout rooms, I'll break you out. So there'll be 5 rooms. Feel free to stay for the 10 minutes. Again, I'll give you a 1-minute warning before the end, and hope to see you at the next event. Really appreciate your attendance, and I'll see you then.
Thanks everyone for coming. Enjoy the breakout rooms.
Thank you all.
You.